Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, and joined as always when talking football, football recruiting, football team news, anything football related. My co-host and HappyValleyInsider.com very own Dylan Callahan-Crawley. Dylan, James Franklin spoke earlier this Monday. Some not so good news on the injury front. Let's start off with Anthony Donkoh, a long-term injury, aka long-term, last game of the season, probably means out for the season, maybe the bowl game too. I guess that's to be determined still, but how big of a loss is that for Penn State, and how are they going to replace him?
Sure, and if you don't mind, can you manage my mute button here as
Yes,
we do this
I
podcast? Have
got
to
you.
double tap multitask here and feed the little one as we record. But yeah, two major losses for Penn State
Hmm.
this week, and ones that you both have to, I think, be really concerned about. Let's start with Anthony Donkoh, starting right tackle for Penn State this year. Left the game against Minnesota very early in that game. I believe the second snap from scrimmage, backpedaling while facing Jaw Joyner, went down with I guess it was a theoretically a contact injury, but it's not like he was rolled up upon. It's not like somebody took him out at the legs. He just kind of was backpedaling and almost looked like he tripped or slipped, but fell, grabbed his knee, had to be carted off the field, I believe. Came back to the sidelines in crutches and street clothes. That one's major because Donk been their best offensive lineman, I think, all season from start to finish. Their most consistent when healthy. Now he's been banged up a lot too.
Yes.
He left that UCLA game with a shoulder injury. It looked like, and
Hmm.
has kind of not been healthy since then. Um, and now, long term injury at this point in the season kind of tells you what you need to know. I don't expect to see him throughout the rest of the year. Nolan Ritchie steps into that spot. And Ritchie's been okay this year. He's had ups and downs and some struggles. Um, but, when you're talking the college football playoffs, you're going to face some elite pass rushers. And that automatically becomes an area of concern in those big games because it takes one play to wreck a game, whether that's a big turnover, whether that's your quarterback getting sacked and maybe getting hurt or whatever it may be. That's the type of I think Nolan Ritchie is going to be able to do fine, but I don't think Nolan Ritchie is Anthony Donkoh levels right now, and that's a concern for me for Penn State going into the college football playoffs. He's gonna need a really big week of practice here before Maryland, and that roughly 3 weeks off until the college football playoffs is going to be big for Nolan Ritchie and Penn State here. And
Uh,
then go ahead.
Go on.
No,
Next one up is Alonzo Ford, defensive tackle. Now that one kind of, you would think Alonzo Ford. If I told you this about a month ago, 2 months ago, you're probably not complaining too much. Now that he's gone, Hakeem Beamon's gone, you're probably starting to get a little worried about this defensive tackle
yeah,
depth, especially come college football playoff time.
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say is you come into just this month alone, and
Hmm.
Penn State is in a pretty good spot when it comes to the depth on that defensive tackle. They've been so all season long. You were talking about, wow, Penn State not has doesn't have two, three, four. They have five defensive tackles this season that they can trust to play a lot. In obviously Zane Durant, um, Keziah Izzard, Devon J. Thomas. Um, who am I missing here?
Jay Thomas, Zane Durant, Keziah Izzard,
Beeman,
Beeman
yeah,
gone, but
Beeman, and then Ford. Now Beeman and Ford are gone, and you're left with three guys.
mm-hmm.
Um, which puts you an injury away from having
Liam Andrews.
scary. Leading manager's has been out for most of the
Oh
season.
yeah, Judge. Jeez.
Uh,
I don't even know who you
if
go.
you look at the snaps, the next closest snap count wise would be Ty Blanton, and he's played 32 snaps this year. He's played well on those 32 snaps, but he's only played 32 snaps this season. And it was the only person ahead of him was Hakeem Beamon, who obviously only played in 8 games compared to everybody else's 11. And there is a significant gap, is what I'm saying, between uh, the sixth guy and those top five that they had. And now there's a massive gap between the number three guy and the uh,
Four,
would have been sixth
five,
guy in Blandon.
six. Yeah.
So if they're going to go into Maryland and the playoffs realistically with three defensive tackles that they can reliably trust. Because I'm not sure Ty Blandon is a spot in his development where you can trust him to make not even make an impact, but it's more so, can you trust him to be consistent enough and fundamental enough not to make a back breaking mistake in a playoff game that costs you a touchdown or whatever, or a big first down, whatever it may be. I mean, though the tiniest margins will be exposed in the playoffs.
And
A lot
that's
of
their
players
Blandon.
talked about that after the Ohio State game. It's like
Hmm.
the margin between beating Ohio State and winning against Ohio State, sorry, losing to Ohio State and beating Ohio State is incredibly thin.
Hmm.
It is not that big of a gap. It is the smallest of margins. And in a playoff game, it's that way as well. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how Penn State um, really attacks this defensive tackle room going forward. Uh, do they try to move one of their defensive, not full time, but do they try to get one of their
Temporary.
defensive ends moved inside on pass rushing situations?
Hmm.
Like what do they do there? Because it is gone from great depth to really thin, really fast.
Yeah. I know there's been some concern among a couple Penn State fans we've talked to. Is there any other injuries? Is Katron Allen hurt? Is he fine? Because I know he only played 20 something snaps this past week, or versus I think what did Singleton have? 44, 43?
Yeah, so Katron, I from all I gather is healthy. Nick Singleton's getting healthier, it seems, every
Mhm.
week, which Franklin talked about this week.
Huge.
Keon Wiley's been practicing the last few weeks, which is big news for them. I think he could be back in time for that. I would be surprised if we saw him against Maryland. I'm not gonna say he's playing, but I wouldn't be surprised. I definitely think we see him in the playoffs, which would be big for them
Hmm.
at linebacker. But at the same time, what is a guy who hasn't played at all this season going to be able to give you in that type of situation? But yeah, I mean, Penn State's key players outside of the two we just talked about are again healthier, which is
Hmm.
big for them because if you're going to make a run the college football playoffs, it's at this. I mean, talent is going to play a big factor here,
Hmm.
and but health and depth is going to play probably the biggest factor in the college football playoffs. Now, for the most part, the more talented teams, the teams with the more talent, are going
Hmm.
to have the more depth. But um, that's where these are going to be make and break. And it's not about how talented that depth is too. It's how game ready is that depth, and is that depth ready to play impactful snaps in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Now, is there really anything else that we want to talk about? I know we talked injuries. We talked what Franklin said. We talked running backs. I don't know if there's really anything else. College football playoff ranking came out this week. Nothing really different there. I mean, we'll have Maryland, a different podcast for a Maryland preview, but I think that's about it for this episode. This is more of a little bit of a quicker one just to get you guys an update on these injuries, an update on the latest status on who's going to replace those guys, too. Looking through the defensive tackle chart one more time, like you said, Ty Blanding has some snaps. Xavier Gillum, as a freshman, has some snaps. Caleb Artis has some snaps. So they're guys, they're just not high level guys yet. So I should say. So we'll wait and see kind of how they fill that role. Hopefully they don't have to go really a bit further than Blanding because if they
Yeah,
do, they're in trouble.
yeah, and just now that little guy here is now crying. Yeah, those snap counts. Just kind of reiterate what I was saying. Zane Durant, 397. Devon J. Thomas, 328. So those two are
Hmm.
obviously the top,
Of course.
top two guys.
Hmm.
Alonzo Ford, 199. Sorry, Kazai Azard, 199. Alonzo Ford, 186. Another clear distinction with those two. Hakeem Beamon, 107. Now that was over, 8 games, so That's 13 snaps a game. He probably would be about 150 snaps at this point if he would have stayed. Um, but then Ty Bland 32, Xavier Gilliam 24, Caleb Ortiz 23, and those are the only other three that have played this year. So yeah, it's gonna now Joseph Muipai has moved inside from defensive end, but he's only played 2 snaps this year, and there's no way that he's gonna be in a situation where he can play defensive tackle in the college football playoffs and do it at a level high enough for Penn State to be successful.
Well, good news is they have a kind of an easy one this week in Maryland. I don't think this Maryland team's
Should
very
be.
good this year.
Should be.
So we'll see what maybe they can get some of these younger guys some reps later in the game, but we will wait and see. But that's basically it for this one. As I said in our last podcast, definitely check out our Twitter, X, at Penn State Rivals. We have a little giveaway going on. It's the Penn State ice mold for your drinks. Team Ice just came out with it. Pretty cool. Makes you a little Penn State ice cube every time. But a little giveaway on there. All you have to do is retweet and tag a friend, and that's basically it. And make sure you're following at Penn State Rivals, of course. Check us out on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, hit the subscribe button down below. It's easy, it's free, it's simple, and it also helps us grow the pod and do more of these. So, but for me and Dylan, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.